Hello, my name is Renan Augusto Pereira dos Santos. I'm a postgraduate student in Biological Sciences at Universidade Estadual Paulista in the city of Botucatu, and I'll present to you the study named Coexistence in two sympatric hermit crabs, using the Shell Adequacy Index as tool for analyzing competition. Because hermit crabs have a soft phloem, they use gastropod shells to protect this part of their body, so these shells may directly influence on a hermit crab's life story. These animals don't choose these shells randomly, but rather considering aspects to determine a better fitting shell, like the presence or absence of epibionts, internal volume, weight, and others. Here we have a shell with no epibionts present, and a shell with a lot of epibionts present. Another way to access shell quality is the Shell Adequacy Index created by Vance in 1972, which is a ratio between the hermit crab's real size and the hermit crab's perfect size for the shell it's occupying. If the value is equal to 1, the hermit crab is occupying an ideal shell. If it's lower than 1, it's occupying a smaller shell than it should, and if it's higher than 1, it's occupying a bigger shell than it should. This search for the better fitting shell, along with the coexistence of some species, may lead to competition for shells, as you can see right here. So the objectives of this study were to evaluate if two sympatric species of hermit crabs, Pagurus brevidactylus and Pagurus criniticornis, are competing for the best fitting shells in the south of the Brazilian coast on the state of Santa Catarina. The samples are gathered at Sepultura Beach through free diving. They were taken seasonally during the years of 2017 and 2018, taking all 4 seasons in count, and the specimens were frozen and conserved for further analysis. On the laboratory, the animals were taken from their shells with the help of tweezers, and using a stereo microscope and specific taxonomic keys, the specimens and their shells were identified. We used a digital caliper to measure some aspects of them, and a precision balance to weigh them. The animals were classified into demographic groups as males presenting a gonopore opening on a 5th periopod, females and ovigerous females presenting a gonopore opening on a 3rd periopod, and intersex individuals presenting both openings. The sire was adapted from Vance. Here we used the wet weight of the animals and the shell aperture length and width. Normality and nomosodisticity were tested with the Shapiro-Wilk and Levine tests, and we also performed the Wilcoxon, Rank-Sun, and Kruskal-Wallis tests. Pagurus brevidactylus occupied 21 gastropod shells, all shown here. 64.71% of them used Silicium atratum shells. 21.57% of them used Clademontiella nodulosa shells. Pagurus criniticornis occupied only 5 gastropod shells, and 96.71% of them used Silicium atratum shells only. Regarding the shell aperture length, Pagurus brevidactylus occupy the ideal shells. Pagurus criniticornis occupies smaller shells than they should, and the males of Pagurus criniticornis also occupy smaller shells than they should. Regarding the shell aperture width, there are no differences between the species, but considering the demographic groups, the ovigerous females of Pagurus criniticornis occupy shells ideal to them, and the ovigerous females of Pagurus brevidactylus occupy smaller shells than they should. So Pagurus brevidactylus uses a more diverse pool of shells as seen on other studies. And Pagurus criniticornis shows a preference for Silicium atratum shells as also seen on other studies. But Silicium atratum shells are the most used by both species. So we can see a preference for shells regarding Pagurus criniticornis, but also the animals may be using the most abundant shell on the environment because Silicium atratum shell is the most abundant shell. Pagurus brevidactylus occupies better feeding shells, and there is a niche overlap between the species because Pagurus brevidactylus occupies mainly the rocky shores, and Pagurus criniticornis occupies mainly the unconsolidated substrates. But these two microhabitats have a transition zone where they meet, so there is this niche overlap. Shells constitute a limited resource, and this limitation, along with the coexistence of the two species and the fact that they are both using the same shell, most Silicium atratum, may lead to competition. So concluding, both Pagurus species mainly occupy the most abundant gastropod shell, Silicium atratum. Pagurus brevidactylus occupies a higher pool of shells in comparison to Pagurus criniticornis. There is a niche overlap where the two microhabitats that two species live in transition, and this may lead to competition, with Pagurus brevidactylus occupying the better feeding shells. Here are some references I used, and I'd like to thank everyone that's listened to this study. Thank you.